So going back to the idea that all of these buckets, all of these containers have to have sizes, right? In the real world, you have smaller buckets, bigger buckets, and gigantic buckets, right? So with that idea, we also have to understand how these buckets, variable types, are laid out in Java. Because there will be times when we need certain buckets to do what we need to do, to assign variables or to assign things to them more than others. So sometimes we need a bigger bucket, other times we just need a very small one, okay? So the integer here that we created here, it's a good bucket, right? But let's try something really interesting. Let's keep adding numbers here in our myInt. Let's keep going, and save. And right away, you notice there's a problem. It says here, if you hover over, it says integer number too large. What does that mean? Well, it means that this whole number here is too large for the type myInt. For the type int, I mean. Okay? So there it tells you that we have size issues. Obviously, you can't put 20,000 or 20 ounces in a 10 ounces bottle. That physically it's impossible, right? So that's the whole idea here. The reason why we have these sort of capacities in Java, capacities when we talk about variable, is because later on when you start building bigger applications, we have to have certain flexibilities, right? With these flexibilities also come other issues, right? Issues of memory allocation, issues of efficiency, because we want our programs to always be efficient. That's the whole idea. You don't want a program that bugs down, takes a lot of memory space when it runs. Okay, so that's the reason why we even bother to have these different sizes of buckets, quote unquote. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is, now that we understand a little bit of this size capacity component that comes with variables, let's talk about another type. This type is called byte. Byte is a small type, which means it's a smaller bucket that allows you to put just enough things inside of that bucket. Okay, so it's smaller than an integer. How do we create a byte variable? You probably guessed it, say byte, and you see our code helper here. It shows right away, it says byte, just say enter, and you see that's our type, and you can say my byte. Let's put 123, okay, and save. Let's go ahead and come back here. Let's say here, again, now that we know about concatenation, you can say my byte is, and we're going to concatenate the byte, say my byte. If save, you already know this, it should say 123. My byte is 123. Now, going back to the idea of sizes, let's try something really interesting. Let's say 128. We have a problem. The reason why I have a problem, it says incompatible types, required byte, found int. What it's saying here, translating, is just saying that, well, my byte cannot take this large of a number, right? 128 is too big for my byte, because remember, my byte is the smallest type, that we can't put 128 into my byte bucket or variable, because it just doesn't, the capacity is too much, it doesn't fit. Okay, if you go 127, you should see there's no problem. So the threshold is here, 128 is a problem. So that just tells you that my byte allows up to 127 capacity, positive and negative. I don't want you to complicate things, but just think in those terms that my byte is smallest, and so it only allows a certain amount of a certain length or capacity of numbers. So now you understand a little bit about byte. And of course, you know, the properties are the same. We were able to take that byte and concatenate it with string. While we're here, let's go ahead and talk about the second type, which is short. So short is 2 times the size of a byte. So if you're in a situation where you need a bigger bucket to put your numbers or your things, quote unquote, then you probably will use short times byte, something like that. So you know, we can then, how do we start a short? How do we create a short variable? Just a short, there it is, say my short, Notice if I say is equal 128, I'm still okay because, well, we said byte is up to 127. Since short is twice as big as byte, then 128. Okay, so there we go. Of course, you can go ahead and do the same. We're just going to copy this and put here and change this to short. Save and run. You should say here, my short is 128. The next one we'll talk about is the float. Now, float, I like to think of float, at least in the beginning, as any decimal, any number with decimal points, right? So if you think of a float, for instance, a float would be, if we say 1.34 or 3.14, that's the pi, right? And so forth. So those are our floats. So there are fraction numbers that we need to represent. The way we do that, we say float is equal my float, and we can say 3.14, I mean. Okay, since we know that's pi, say pi num, like that, okay? Now, right away, the compiler tells us something is not right? It says, well, incompatible types again require float, found double, because the compiler can't differentiate a double from float, as it is in Java at least. So you have to put an F so that we tell the compiler, hey, no problem, this is not a double, and we'll talk next what a double is. Essentially, it's the same as a float, but a little bit bigger. So now the compiler, Java compiler, knows exactly that, okay, this 3.14f is indeed a float. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so if you'd go like this, copy this again, and go here and save, say float. Okay, let's save that and run. It should see 3.14 here. Okay, let's move on. The next one, it's going to be double. Yes, you guessed it. Again, double, it's going to be bigger than float. Now, with double, we say double, say my double, if I can spell it correctly, is equal, let's say, to 23.89. You usually want to use double if you're talking about a bigger number than just fractions. Of course, they still have decimal points. And you want to use double, for instance, to when we talk about currency, right? You can say $28.25, right? So it's more accurate, the dollar amount with cents, when using doubles, because that will be the best way to use to represent currencies, and many other things too, other values, let's say physics or mathematical values and so forth. So again, the same thing here. Notice the only difference between double, I mean visually at least, the only difference between double and float is that for float we have the F appended here, which signifies this is a float, telling the compiler, Java compiler that is, that indeed this is a float. So treat it as a float, not a double. Okay, but on the double, you don't have to put F because, well, this is a double. All right. So again, we can do the same thing, copy here and put here, say double, and there we go. And run, you should see it says double 23.89. The next type is Char, which stands for character. Okay, this is not a movie character or a theater character, right? This is a character as in each letter or each character of a word or a sentence or a text, for instance, right? So a character in this case is, for instance, in this case, character, right? We see the C there. That would be a character. The H is its own character, A, and so forth. That also could involve, let's say, the and sign, the dollar sign, the at sign, even this dot or comma or zero, and so forth. So you get the idea, right? So character is just a single letter, single item that you can put on the screen. Okay? So how do we define a character variable? Well, we say char, right? There's char. I'm going to say my char is equal to, let's say, h. Now, there's a problem here. The reason why there's a problem is because we only use double quotes as it is now when we're talking about strings. When it comes to characters, as you can see, if you hover over, it says incompatible types again, required char found string. What it's saying here is that, well, you said this is going to be a type of character, right? My char is going to be type of character, but yet you are telling me this is supposed to be a string, which makes no sense. So now the compiler is complaining, is saying, well, you probably either made a mistake or lied to me, or you don't understand how this works, because I am a character bucket. I can only fit in one character, right? And to do that, yes, you can say, well, yes, I did put one character, which is H in this case, but yet the problem is you put double quotes, which you only use double quotes when it comes to creating string. How do we do this? We just put single quotes around. That's when we know, the compiler know, that yes, indeed, you are talking about a character, and that error will go away. Same thing if you go ahead and try to put another H, two or more H's, then you will have issues, because again, is that problem we're talking about here. The types are very, very important in Java, because it says you cannot fit in something that is too big into a too small container. That makes no sense. So this is very important to understand in Java, because you will run into a lot of issues once you start building a little bit more advanced applications or programs. Okay, so types are very, 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 very important in Java. So I want you to really understand this so that you don't run into a lot of issues later on. So if you save this again, say my char, and let's copy my char so we can see it displayed, because there's always that instant gratification when we see something displayed, at least for myself. All right, there we go. So my char is H. I've thrown a lot your way here. So we started with strings, and we learned about integers and byte and short and float and doubles and chars. Whew. There's a lot. But I need you to start thinking about the similarities or the connections between all of this, right? What are the similarities when you look at all of this? Well, they're all containers. They're all variables. So I want you to start thinking about, yes, they're all variables, but they are different types of variables in that their capacities are different. That's the only difference there. And the rest is just syntax that you can get used to it. For instance, the difference between a char and a difference between a string. Small subtleties, I guess, but important to notice. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.